Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've recorded meetings and conventions here in Southern California since 1998. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994, and I got sober in a small town called Santa Maria. I moved to Los Angeles when I had 5 years sober and started recording meetings shortly after I got here. In 2013, I started recording conventions. So please enjoy the channel. Please like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. Just click right down there. Thank you.
It is now time to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Bobby N.
Oh, God. I'm Bob. I am an alcoholic. I'm a little disappointed that we've closed the curtains here. This is kind of disturbing to me. I kind of like that Eugene O'Neill stage set that was up there. I thought the ghost of Jason Robards would come from the wings and bring a bottle of brandy out for us or something. Yeah, I remember when you had a birthday, you didn't even need a crew. Right? Yeah. Well, I'm an alcoholic, and I also developed a fondness for corrective narcotics in different forms to keep me on the even keel in life. And that didn't pan out very well. So I ended up here in the loser club. And because, let's don't anybody be fooled, You got to be a failure to join this outfit. So trying to look good around here, man, is really silly. All you people with 0 to 364 days, may believe in that, But anybody who's been here for more than 20 minutes just kind of knows how ridiculous that is, because it's alcoholism, not alcoholism, and, it just keeps coming back, and it keeps recycling itself, and some days you feel okay, some days you feel like, you've got a handle on it, and some days, you just feel like the only light at the end of the tunnel is the mail train. And it's headed right towards you. And, I was telling somebody before the meeting, any morning that I wake up and I'm not suicidal, I kind of consider I'm on a manic streak or something. Because I'm one of those alcoholics that is not really married to reality, very happily. We are engaged. And, we date on a regular basis, but there's some days, where reality and I just don't get along all that well, And what I've learned to do is kind of call the whole thing off on those days, And it's okay, by the way, you newcomers, to start a new day at any time during the day, as many times as you have to. You don't have to wait till midnight to have a new day. And some days you just, it's all you can do to not drink or use. And that's it. And I'm very fortunate in that my sponsor convinced me right at the very beginning that if I could go 24 hours without a drink or a fix or a tuck or a poke or a rub or a sniff or a snort or a swallow, that I was a success no matter what any son of a bitch on this planet had to say about me. And I bought it, because when I got here, I was doing okay, compared to what? But, I wasn't at the bottom. I didn't crawl into Alcoholics Anonymous. But I did feel a great lack of success in my life. And all I wanted was a success. And he said that magic word. And it blew my mind, as has everything else worth shooting that I've ever learned in these rooms. It blew my mind. I'm a product of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm the kind of person that received my sobriety information in like crossbow bolts to the brain, just boom. Like when somebody said, if you don't drink, you won't get drunk. It blew my mind. Well, this is too heavy for a genius to kind of process, because make no mistake, I'm not only a genius, but I'm an expert. And if you want to put a man on the moon or something, or like, general manage the Dodgers, you want to elect a president, you want to straighten something out, you come to me, because I know exactly how it should be, And I get very frustrated when it's not that way. For instance, this year I gave up on the Lakers. I stopped coaching the Lakers, and look what happened. I went to New York for the winter. Look what happened. And they can't beg me to come back either. I've had enough of round ball. I'm moving to baseball now. I've got teams to manage. I've got players to bring along. I've got things to do. I'm a busy guy. You know what I mean? So listen, I want to tell you this. One of the great advantages of being the second speaker in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous is that the first speaker does all the heavy lifting, And Katie, that was a perfect AA talk that you gave. You completely gave a perfect AA talk, You described what you were like, what happened, and what it's like now. That's what we try to do in general terms. And you talked about blackouts and vomiting and waking up in sketchy places with sketchy people. And that's my story. I don't even have to do a drunk-a-log. And you talk about like sort of, accidentally going to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is what happened to me. I had no intention of getting sober. I didn't need or want this program. I didn't feel the need to get sober. I felt the need for science to develop a pill that I could take. They would doctor me into human form in the morning without the alchemy that I had to practice. Because I would forget sometimes whether it was 2 red pills and 3 green ones, or, what was it, 2 green pills, 3 red ones, and 2 whites in the line or 2. I didn't quite get that right sometimes. And so what would happen is I would get up and doctor myself into human form, and then someplace about an hour after I wake up, I would overshoot my mark, and I'd blow another day, And see, my drunk-a-log sort of basically is this. When I was about 13 years old, because I'm a geezer, and when I was a kid, we didn't have drugs in grammar school. So my first real severe drug was alcohol. And I didn't really kind of bump into that like in any meaningful way until I was about 13 years old, 12 and a half, 13 years old. I'd had a couple of little beers, like with the guys that box groceries, or set pins at the bowling alley with, that kind of stuff. But I didn't like the taste of it. And then I was about 13, somebody gave me a vodka tonic, and it just bubbled its way right down there like bad lemonade, And, but it sort of like looked good to have one in my hand at this party. I was at my friend's house. Parents were having a party, and his dad was having some fun with me or something. And he said, "What would you like to drink?" And I said, "Whatever you're having, sir." And he gave me a vodka and tonic. And the next thing I knew, the vodka tonic went down too fast, and I was left without my prop. So I had to go back to the bar and get another one. About 2 or 3 in, pow, I got that cool register we get. Oh, tell them I'm speaking. I can't take it right now. And whatever the drug that we first run into is, whether it's something that takes place under the bedclothes, whether it's like a big, plate of cookies from, whatever that drug is, whether it's a needle in the arm, or puff of something. or a swallow of alcohol, I got that rush, you know. I got that little register, the one that says, yep, you're handsome, bulletproof, and it's your world. Now let's get naked and be somebody. You know, a slap across the face later, the laughter stopped, and, you know, I went back to the bar for more giggle water. And that's my drunk love, you know, because for the next 25 years, unless I was physically prevented from doing so, you know, by being, you know, physically prevented from doing so, I put mind-altering chemicals into my body in one form or another, you know. And I never really got that laughter back in precisely the same way. I would get a new kind of manic laughter every time I would discover a new chemical, you know, or sometimes a new, and when I say chemical, I include alcohol. You know, I remember Pim's Cup was a decent drink for me at one point. Now, why? I guess it went with the dope I was taking, but whatever it was, it just seemed like a gentlemanly drink. A Pim's Cup, please. Thank you very much. Have another? I know I just ordered, but I know I'm going to need another, you know. You know, and basically, you know, I drank everything except gin. I wouldn't drink gin unless there was nothing else around. Then I would drink it out of an ashtray. You know. Because I'm one of these guys, I like to get it on. You know what I'm saying? I do not like to, I don't know anything about social drinking. My idea of social drinking, you know, is somebody probably sitting around with some Tennessee Jack, you know, watching the Raiders lose a football game or something, and saying, damn, nice catch, man. You know, I don't know anything about that shit. I just like to, like, pour enough of that stuff down my neck until, you know, I decide to go out and cop. You know. Or vice versa, you know. I just like come out of a little rest. Possibly make myself a drink. Just to take the edge off. And I don't know anything about smoking crack. I don't even know anything about freebasing, you know, because I got sober before this was happening. You know, I've been sober since 1977, and I'm an old guy, and I come from Akron, Ohio. So who could blame me, right? I mean, for many years of my life, I was kind of ashamed of being from the home of the soapbox derby and Quaker puffed rice. You know, and Hugh Downs, and then Chrissy Hine made it pretty cool. But then I got sober, and suddenly I was from Akron, you know. Yes. Mm-hmm. I've been to the Cyberling estate. Yes, I know that house. Mm-hmm. Oh, God. Okay, so what am I talking about? I don't have a clue here. All right? I'm going to tell you what my sponsor said. He said, don't worry, you don't have the message. He said, if people come to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous to get the message, they'll get it no matter who the speaker is. Your job is to just try to entertain them. You know, I thought, well, that makes some sense, you know, because, you know, I've been making a fool out of myself in public for most of my life. Why should I stop now? You know? And so, you know, I do want to talk about sex and the steps and God, you know? But I just don't know where to start. You know, one thing, though, when I saw Mary get her 30-year cake, Mary P. See, I have to reveal now in public, for maybe the first time for most of you, especially you kids, that Mary P. is my beach sponsor. Yes. And in the old days, there used to be a thing in Venice called AA Beach. It was near the Rose lifeguard stand. And originally, it was a topless beach. And nothing funny about that, really. And it was really fun, you know. It was really fun to go down there and just like, you know, the guy who talked about falling asleep in the sun, you know, happy birthday. But, you know, we used to fall asleep in the sun all the time, you know, preferably not topless because that can really stink. But, you know, we used to like, we were informed as newcomers, you know, that we were here to have a good time, you know. We weren't here to do time. We were here to be happy, joyous, and free while we trudged the road of happy destiny, you know. And like every other newcomer, you know, I don't know what any of that stuff means. You know, I look at the 12 steps and the 12 traditions and I go, whoa, you know, Egyptian arithmetic. I can't follow these things, you know, too hard. And then I found out, you know, like the steps are designed, you know, with good news and bad news. You know, the bad news is that they're to get me to do precisely those things that I have no intention of ever doing in life. You know, no parts of them. You know, and the good news is if I make a little pencil neck attempt to try to follow those steps, even now on a daily basis, the fear goes away. You know, and I venture to say there's nobody. Oh, and there may be a couple of visitors here. You know. But anybody in this room who's an alcoholic knows about that fear. You know, it's not a happy kind of fear. You know, it's not a U.S. government-sponsored fear. You know, which is the terrorists are in the parking lot kind of fear. You know, vote for me and I'll get rid of them for you. Kind of fear. No, not that kind of fear. It's the kind of fear of, oh my God, something's going to happen really, really bad, and it's going to happen to me, you know. And when I turn around, they're gone. You know, I know they're following me, but when I whip around, they've disappeared. That fear. It's a fear that there will never be enough drugs, sex, money to make me feel whole. You know, that fear that no matter, you know, I had a shot at life once upon a time, but I blew it years ago. So now, let's try to find a smooth and groovy way to die. You know, that kind of fear, you know. And when I'm drinking and using, I'm not afraid of death. I'm courting it, you know. I want an end to the misery as soon as possible. You know, and when I'm drinking and using, I know that the answer is not in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous with a bunch of losers with big grins on their faces that run around talking about the steps, you know, and doing inventories and making amends, and taking wet ones to detox and sitting up all night with shaking people. And, you know, this does not sound like fun, man. You know, when I'm using, you know, I just want you to get out of my life. You know what I mean? Just get away from me, man, and let me enjoy what little pleasure I have left. Woo, yeah, baby. And the other thing about being an alcoholic is, by the way, I'm different. I'm different than everybody here. It's about me, my problems, my life, my world, you know, my program, my big book. Yeah. My big book might look just like your big book, but I guarantee you it's mine. And it's mine. And you newcomers, you know, you hear this stuff in like nice and gentle meetings, you know, in Southern California. AA. You know, please, you're the most important person in this room. Let us love you until you can learn to love yourself. And please keep coming back. Ha ha! Well, maybe for you, but as far as I'm concerned, the most important person in this room is me. And if anybody's going to get loaded tonight, better you all should get loaded than me. And I suggest that you try to find that place in your sobriety, or you might get loaded. You might get loaded. I'm one of those kind of sickening alcoholics who accidentally came to a meeting of AA and stayed sober. And it was impressed upon me that it was only for one day, but it was for the rest of my natural life. It wasn't like, get sober every 89 days, not every 2 years. It was like, get sober and go through what it takes to stay sober, And it's not easy, man. It's not easy. Anybody in these rooms who's been sober for a while will tell you, it ain't easy. I tell my newcomers, did you cry yet? Big dudes, did you cry yet? One dude I had to say, listen, no drinking, no doping, and no killing, man. What do you mean, man? I could kill it. I said, well, stop it. No killing. I want to kill him, man. I said, no. I'm sorry, not allowed to kill him. And no suicides. No suicides. Because if you're a real alcoholic, you'll get to there. You'll get to that place where it just doesn't seem worth it. It just seems like jumping in front of an RTD bus is the answer. Or maybe trying to swim to Hawaii if you're clean. Just going out going out in 15-foot surf on a boogie board, and not knowing how to swim. That's a good idea. Takes more than a weekend to learn to surf, really does. But it can be done. And it's fun to learn. What else am I talking about? Am I finished yet? Do I see the 5 minutes on yet? Okay. Well, let's get into some serious shit then. Let's talk about sex then. Sex. I remember it well. So fantastic when you're a kid. It becomes so subtle when you get older that when you have sex, you kind of hope someone else is there. Because it makes it so much more fun. Oh, gosh. Anyway, imagine people trying to tell you, like, no, you don't. No. Not for a year. Take it from me, not for you. I will say one thing about sex, They say, you hear around these rooms, you don't sleep with newcomers. And that makes a lot of sense, And I'll tell you why. It's not to protect the newcomer. Newcomers know what they want, precisely, and what they're willing to do to get it. It's the old-timers who kind of get it confused sometimes and think it might be love. All right, that's a cheap joke. So let's talk about God. Because, that's what this program's all about, no matter what you might think. It's about, according to the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which my sponsor taught me was the sum total of all the knowledge in the universe, the first 164 pages, and every time I read it, it seems to grow new sentences that I haven't seen before. And now I'm trying to figure out how could these old crackers from Vermont, who wound up crossing paths in Akron, home of puffed rice and the soapbox derby, how could they have figured out a plan that would work for a hip, slick, and cool junkie in 2005? How did they know that? And the only answer is they didn't. Because the oldest, or the longest length of sobriety at the time that they wrote the book was 4 years. They didn't know if this would work for 5. You know, they were trying all kinds of crazy experiments to stay sober. You know, they were desperate dudes, man, trying to stay sober in those days. But somehow, the deal that was handed down to them, you know, works for anybody who wants to stay sober or clean this much more than they want to get high. You know, all you have to do is pray to be willing to be willing. You don't have to be willing to get sober, just, you know. And you know, if you're my type of alcoholic, you know, you've been through the God cycle. So by the time you get here, you know, you're going, what, God? What? Okay, God, please, okay, I won't do it anymore, you know. Leave me alone. Let me get some sleep. And I'm one of those alcoholics who made deals with God. You know, I had a jar of Percodans in this hand, and I hadn't been asleep in 3 days, and my head was cranked into my shoulders, and I was in a fetal position on my bed, and I said, all right, mother, if you exist, let's see you stop me from taking these pills. And the thought went through my head of, uh-oh, what if there is a God? He probably hates it if you talk to him like that. So I put my hands together and said the same thing. You know, all right, mother, if you exist, let's see you stop me from taking these pills. And by the way, make it 100 times worse than this. You know, and I thought, you know what, this is really some sad shit. Because when I take these pills, that means I can't even hack it in Alcoholics Anonymous with a bunch of losers, man. And I'd had tetanus once, and I'd had felt similar pain in my shoulders, and I'd gotten back to a port to see a doctor. They had it on a boat, and I'd gotten back by taking scalding showers, you know, and so I thought, you know, I'll try for a scalding shower. That'll be my part of the bargain, and then I'm taking the pills. And so I went and got in the shower, and there was no hot water. And the only reason I lived there was because there's so much hot water. You know, because I'm the kind of guy, when I'm like jonesing or something, I like to take those 45-minute showers, you know, where you kind of crouch down and let the scalding tropical rainstorm get your skin back on and stuff. And it made me so angry, I threw myself across the bed and passed out. And the next day I was at a meeting of Architects of Adversity in West Hollywood, because it used to be the only noon meetings I knew about. And this guy said, Frank the junkie, he said, hey, what, did you take the pills, man? And Frank, you know, we used to, like, you know, get people to drive him down to visit his mother. So Frank said, you know, what happened to the pills, man? Did you take them? And I said, no. And he said, well, if you weren't so stupid, you could consider your prayer was answered. You know, and it blew my mind. That was one of the major things that blew my mind, Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I made these deals with God all along, you know. The next deal I made with God was like, you know what? I'll do everything that I'm asked to do in Alcoholics Anonymous, but you got to feed me, you got to shelter me, and you got to show me how to have some money in my pocket, because I don't know how to do anything on the square. You know, you got to take care of it. And I'm pleased to report, you know, that I haven't missed any meals, that I haven't tried to miss. You know? I'm relatively clothed most of the time, you know, except when I'm running up and down the beach in my panties or something. And it was a place to crash. Okay, so then, you know, I'm getting the gong show signs. So I want to say the other thing about God, you know, you don't need to know anything about him. You just need to know there is one, you ain't him. You know, leave it alone, you newcomers. Just leave it alone, okay? Brain broke, don't use it, okay? Very dangerous, very sharp-edged tool here, you know? Not to be handled lightly by people who put flammable liquids down their neck, You know, it's just to not compute, okay? This is like basic idiocy number 101. Do not use this tool, okay, for a good long time. Listen to other people. Brain broke, don't use it, okay? That's all you need to know. There is a God, you ain't him. You know, it'll work if you give it a chance. Mainly, I want you to take this away. They say Alcoholics Anonymous is a song, okay? The words are in the first 164 pages of the big book, right? The music is the laughter in these rooms, okay? Keep making music, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.